Please be seated.
Yes, Mr. Jovanovic.
Thank you. I move on a role of security in Krivaja 1995 and this operation. The prosecution submission of the decision by the command to murder all Muslim men and boys contravenes the evidence in this case. The task of the Krivaja 95 operation was to separate the Srebrenica and Žepa enclaves. It is P107. In military terms, it was one-axis operation in a very narrow area without any ambition to encircle the enemy's troops and take prisoners. Such action usually results in taking of sporadic individual prisoners. The numeric strength of VRS forces assigned for the operation was not adequate for the encirclement and capture of enemy forces. Namely, the VRS deployed about 2,000 soldiers for the action, while 28th Division had more than 10,000 soldiers. I refer to Lazic, it's 4th June 2008, pages 734 to 736. The encircling and capturing of the enemy forces required at least 3 times as many. This means that strength of troops assigned to the operation and the nature of the very operation was not intended at killings, but on the separation of the enclaves. The evidence also demonstrates that after the task was extended to include the takeover of Srebrenica, additional troops were not sent which would have allowed for the encirclement, capture, and killing of members of the 28th Division. This means that such a decision was not made either before or after the fall of Srebrenica. The VRS entered Srebrenica after it had been completely deserted by its population, and despite having knowledge of the fact that the 28th Division had mobilized all its forces and was trying to break through to B&H territory, made no considerable effort to engage all its troops for the purpose of blocking, encircling, and capturing of ABH forces. On the contrary, the VRS immediately sent a majority of its troops who had been participating in the Srebrenica operation to Žepa, which was on the opposite direction of the movement by the 28th Division, leaving Zvornik almost undefended. The aforementioned facts clearly show that there was no evidence that VRS command made any decision to murder all Bosnian men and boys from Srebrenica as stated in paragraph 267 of the prosecution final brief and paragraph 24 of the indictment. The task given to the security organs in this operation was adapted to the goal of the separation of the enclave. The Krivaja 95 operation task was completed on 9 July 1995 when the enclaves were separated. There is no evidence that any prisoners of war were taken during the action. Even after the goal of the operation was extended to the taking of Srebrenica, it did not result in the capture of prisoners. Therefore, the VRS had no any prisoners of war until 12 July 1995. Because of that, the submission of the prosecution that on 11 July 1995, between 2 NATO bombings, Popović spoke with General Krstić about prisoners of war is baseless. The more logical conclusion is that only topic of their conversation, if any, could be how to survive NATO attacks. The task assigned in the Krivaja 95 order ceased once Srebrenica was taken and troops got new tasks relating to JEPA operation. The new tasks were also issued as to prisoners of war, because on 11th of July 1995, President of Republika Srpska appointed Miroslav Deronić as the civilian commissioner for Srebrenica. It's P10. His tasks were, among other things, to, I quote, ensure that all civilian and military organs treat all citizens who participated in combat against the army of Republika Srpska as prisoners of war, and ensure that the civilian population can freely choose where they will live or move to. End quotation. It's paragraph 4. He was also authorized to appoint his assistants. It's paragraph 6. This was the decision of the President of Republika Srpska, who was also the Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces of Republika Srpska. This decision regarding the prisoners derogated and substituted the Krivaja 95 order as to responsibility of the security organs for prisoners of war and entrusted Deronić with the authority to implement this decision. The decision came into force on 11 July 1995, on the same day when VRS entered Srebrenica. I refer to Vuga, 2nd July, page 216 to 219. The assertion of the OTP that Popović stayed at Hotel Fontana on 13 and 14 July is not correct. The document obtained by the defense, and later by the prosecution too, proves that Popović was at the Hotel Fontana on 11 and 12 July 1995 when the Bratunec Brigade approved his stay there. It was shown during the examination of Bjelanović. It is 11 June 2008, page 111 to 112. And on 14 November 2008, the defense provided the trial chamber and the parties with the copies of all the Hotel Fontana documents as requested by the trial chamber. The invoice referred to the prosecution did not indicate the dates he stayed at the Hotel Fontana, but instead the date when Hotel Fontana prepared the invoice and sent it to the Bratunec Brigade for payment. With reference to paragraph 2362, Popović was in the proximity of General Mladić because he had a duty to protect him as a requested person to the Operation Action Juda. The action required, among other things, counterintelligence protection of General Mladić and 3 other VRS generals, which was in the exclusive competence of the security organs. In the scope of these tasks, Popović was in the proximity of General Mladić in Srebrenica on 11 July, at the 3rd Hotel Fontana meeting, and in Potocari on 12 July, and in Vlasenica on 13 July, when General Mladić got there on the ceremony of the handover of duties between General Živanović and General Krstić. However, at the 3rd Hotel Fontana meeting, Popović did not represent anyone, as stated in paragraph 2365. He attended because, as the Chief of Security of the Drina Corps, he got the task to provide counterintelligence protection of the main staff commander in Operation Action Juda. With reference to paragraph 2363, the information that on the afternoon and the evening of 11 July, an estimated 12 to 1,500 able-bodied Muslim men arrived in Potocari was not clear. The prosecution even asserts that there was between 1 and 2,000 Muslim men in Potocari, on 11 July and that VRS was aware of it. According to the prosecution, they posed potential threat to the Bosnian Serb forces that were planning to enter Potocari on 12 July. It is paragraph 492 of prosecution brief. The presence of 1,000 to 2,000 Muslim men in Potocari would not present a potential but a real and serious threat for the VRS. This is because the reconnaissance patrol could not provide information as to whether these people were armed or members of ABH, but eventually only that they were in civilian clothing. The total strength of VRS troops engaged in the Srebrenica operation was 2,000 men. The alleged information would indicate that Muslim forces in Potocari were equal to the VRS troops engaged in the whole of Srebrenica operation. This information would therefore cause a serious source of concern for the VRS, since they were still unaware of the main force of the 28th Division. In such a situation, the VRS would encircle the Potocari in the early morning hours on 12 July and call for the surrender of such forces. General Mladic and other high officers would not enter Potocari with camera crews and journalists, knowing that 2,000 Muslim soldiers could attack them at any moment. Potocari was one of the places where a considerable number of Muslims dwelled until fall of Srebrenica. The able-bodied men being mobilized left the village to the meeting point of 28th Division in Jaglici and Šušnjari before the VRS entered Potocari on 12 July. This means that they were still in Potocari on 11 July in the afternoon and evening. In addition, the headquarters of 280 Brigade was also in Potocari. I refer to 4D135. This brigade defended the Srebrenica-Potocari axis and had the task to defend the industrial area in Potocari. It is P107, paragraph 1, subparagraph 3. On 6 July 1995, this unit, referred as MM Potocari, had 1,007 members. I refer to 1D607. After the fall of Srebrenica on 11 July in the afternoon, and order of 28th Division Command to withdraw its forces to Jaglici and Šušnjari, the troops deployed to defend Potocari left the area on the same afternoon and evening. This meant that a number of 28th Division members passed through Potocari on their way to Jaglici and Šušnjari. I refer to Ruten. It's page 837 to 838, 30 November 2006. So, the VRS reconnaissance patrols could see these men in Potocari on 11 July in the afternoon and evening and included them in the assessment. However, after the ABH troops left Potocari to Jaglici and Šušnjari, only between 400 and 700 men were noted. I refer to Momir Nikolic, transcript 22nd of April, page 009, lines 7 to 20. Due to the above, the information of 12 to 1,500 Muslim men in Potocari on 11 July 1995 was an estimate made before the members of 208th Brigade left Potocari to Jaglici and Šušnjari with mobilized, able-bodied men. The number of Muslim men transported from Potočari on 12 and 13 July was exaggerated and unreliable as testified by witness Mile Janić. He testified in Blagojević that on the first day only 10 to 15 buses was with approximately 70 men in each were dispatched from Potočari. This would mean that 700 to 1,050 men were transported on 12 July only. He further testified that on 13 July, 2 or 3 times more were dispatched. It would mean that on that day, between 1,400 and 3,150 Muslim men were transported. In total, it would suggest that between 2,100 and 4,200 Muslim men were sent from Potočari on 12 and 13 July. According to the witness, a bus had 52 to 54 seats and 15 to 20 people were standing in aisles. It is his testimony is on 20 November 2007, pages 942 to 944. However, a bus full of prisoners with just a driver in it would present an obvious security risk for the driver. The risk would not be diminished by the presence of 1 or 2 soldiers beside the driver. They could not control the prisoners who were sitting and standing due to overcrowding. The soldier or 2 of them standing beside the driver could not see anything but up to 10 prisoners in front of him. The prisoners would be so close to him that he would not be able to prevent an attack despite carrying arms. This therefore means that the VRS would not risk the lives of its personnel by overcrowding the buses with prisoners. Besides, Janić had not only task of counting Muslim men, but of counting all the refugees. He obviously was not able to carry out this task, which meant that Colonel Janković at one point told him that, I quote, an average per bus was therefore worked out and used to calculate how many refugees were transported from Potočari. It is in Blagojević judgment, paragraph 181, and it is in transcript in Blagojević 9773 and 9842. He testified also that some discrepancies in counting were observed by Colonel Janković, which makes both the calculation and estimates unreliable. On the other hand, the witness already told his story in Blagojević, and the trial chamber did not find his estimate credible. I refer to paragraph 495 for the Blagojević trial judgment. His testimony just proved that he did not carry out properly the task of counting the number of persons from Potočari which he was given. The number of separated Muslim men in Potočari is not supported with OTP missing list. It is P566. The source of data is ICRC list, as indicated at page 2, last paragraph. However, it is quite unknown who provided these dates and when, as well as how much time passed before such data were provided. Namely, the date when a person was last seen is not necessarily provided by the eyewitnesses, but also got from other unknown and unreliable sources. Because of that, there is no evidence that the entries in this list in respect to date corroborate the arguments of the prosecution that 2,000 men were separated in Potočari. The list demonstrates that 516 people were last time seen in Potocari before 12th of July. In addition, the list shows 660 Muslim men last seen in Potocari on 12th July. However, Potocari were not under VRS control before the noon on that date. The list does not demonstrate whether 660 people were last seen before or after the VRS entered Potocari. With respect to the testimony of Momir Nikolic, the defense extensively addressed the ostensible conversation between him and Popović in paragraphs 289 to 305 of its final brief. Now, the defense repeats that the conversation described in parts of Nikolic's testimony and the paragraph 4 of his statement of fact related to 12 July 1995 in front of the Hotel Fontana never took place. Popović never told him that Muslim men and boys would be detained and then killed, or that Muslim women and children would be transported to B&H held territory. This was confirmed by Kosoric, who testified that such a conversation has never taken place. Momir Nikolic did his best to court the prosecution and said whatever he believed that the prosecution would like to hear. He even falsely confirmed his own identity on photographs and falsely confessed that he ordered the execution in Kravica and Sandici. He agreed to tell obvious lie that the intent of the VRS in the attack on Srebrenica was to remove all Muslim population from the enclave, although, upon the request of the trial chamber, personally wrote that such decision did not exist at the time and confirmed it in his testimony. He even agreed to avoid any mention of the 28th Division, just to give the illusion that the enclave was demilitarized and that the attack of VRS could not be directed at military targets. Corroborating evidence which the prosecution mentioned was something that Momir Nikolic used to conceive his story. He was provided with all this evidence before he made his statement of fact. The picture taken in front of Hotel Fontana does not depict Momir Nikolic with Popović and Kosoric, but with Popović, Colonel Janković, and General Mladic's bodyguard. Such a picture cannot be taken as corroboration that Momir Nikolic had an alleged conversation with Popović and Kosoric, and in particular about the topic of such a conversation. The ostensible reconnaissance of Ciglane as execution site cannot corroborate the statement of Nikolic that he suggested it to Popović and Kosoric. There is no evidence for the prosecution submission that Popović assigned Momir Nikolic to coordinate the so-called separation of the Muslims in Potocari. Firstly, the terms separation of the Muslim men and boys from their families or the separation from their loved ones were widely used in this case. They are legal mischaracterization of the arrests implemented by the VRS according to the generally accepted norms and customs of war. Such mischaracterization is inciting the ethnic animosity and hatred toward the Serbs who carried out their duties. On the other hand, such mischaracterization consistently conceals the fact that members of the ABH were among the population in Potocari despite of unchallenged evidence demonstrating that in the night between 11 and 12 July, there were 300 ABH members in the UN compound in Potocari. It is 1D463. It seems that Major Franken also permitted a certain amount of men inside the compound who were or could have been active combatants. It's the testimony of Rutten, 30 November 2006, page 885, lines 15 to 21. Popović did not assign Momir Nikolić to coordinate the separation of able-bodied Bosnian Muslim men and boys and expulsion of the women and children in Potočari. The testimony of Nikolić in this regard is not only inconsistent, but in clear contravention with other evidence. According to the witness Bering, who, as professional officer of the Royal Netherlands Army, is perfectly qualified to clarify the military terms, Momir Nikolić was some sort of coordinator, as he himself indicates, for transport and separation, and that he received the authority from Colonel Janković. It's the page 536, transcript 25 September 2006. It was quite logical that someone who coordinates the work of different units should have the authority to do that. On the other hand, he must inform the subjects participating in the work that he was authorized to coordinate. Such persons must inform all concerned who provide him with such authorization so that it could be checked. Momir Nikolić did it and indicated that he was authorized for coordination by Colonel Janković, so that anyone interested in it could check with Colonel Janković. It means if Momir Nikolić was authorized by Popović to coordinate in the so-called separation and transportation of Muslims in Potočari, he would indicate Popović as the individual who authorized him to do that and not Colonel Janković. Bering also testified that Jankovic's role was, first of all, to provide General Mladić with direct assistance, and that was why at one of the meetings he was seated directly next to him, and occasionally he consulted with him. He also learned that Colonel Janković was assigned to wrap matters up on site on behalf of General Mladić as a type of liaison from General Mladić to Dajbat, which meant he was to arrange things with Dajbat to the full execution of General Mladić's plans. He clarified that Mladić's plan meant the transport of refugees, but that it was not his personal observation, but based on insight and hearsay. It is transcript page 144 to 145, 21 September 2006. Sorry. In Blagojević, the witness testified that General Mladić introduced Colonel Janković as his next in command to take care of matters if General Mladić was absent. I refer to Blagojević trial judgment 154. Momir Nikolić testified that after the third meeting in Hotel Fontana on 12 July, he asked Colonel Janković what would be his next task, and he was told that he was to help during the evacuation of the people who were in Potočari. This entailed evacuation and separation of the able-bodied men who were in Potočari. Its testimony of Momir Nikolić on transcript 22nd April 2009, pages 014 to 015, and his statement of fact, paragraph 5. Momir Nikolić confirmed in his testimony in Trbić case that there was no need for him to inform Colonel Janković about what he did in Potočari, given that Colonel Janković himself was deployed in Potočari and Janković was in charge, not him. It is transcript page 268 to 279, 27 of April 2009. The presence of Colonel Janković in Potočari was confirmed by the witness Mile Janić, he testified that early in the morning on 12 July 1995, upon the request of Momir Nikolic, he arrived at Potocari. Nikolic assigned him to Colonel Jankovic, who tasked him, before any of buses had arrived, to count the refugees who would be transported from Potocari. He got the same task the next day. This task indicates that the physical presence of Colonel Jankovic in Potocari was related to the transportation of refugees. It is transcript page 926 to 928, 20 November 2007. In the VRS, the carrying out of an order was regularly reported to Superior Command. The report that the evacuation had been successfully completed was submitted by Colonel Jankovic on 13 July. It's 5DP 113. The report was sent from Bratunec to the main staff and the Drina Corps. If Popović was tasked with coordination, this report would have been sent by him and not Colonel Jankovic. The presence of Colonel Jankovic in Potocari was also observed by Dutch BAT members. Franken complained to him once he got reports on abusing of the detainees in the White House. It is transcript 16 October 2006, page 499. He also asked Franken to sign the statement of evacuation. It is P 453. Franken also testified that Colonel Jankovic made it clear that Dutch BAT members could not leave the base from 13 July until their withdrawal on 21st July. Franken also let Colonel Jankovic know about compilation of the list containing 251 Muslim men registered by the Dutch BAT within their compound in Potocari on 12 or 13 July 1995. It is transcript page 502 to 503, 16 October 2006. According to Van Dijn, it appeared that Colonel Jankovic was inspecting the area. It is OTP final brief, paragraph 335. Finally, Momir Nikolic testified that after ostensible meeting on 12 July 1995, he did not see Popović again on the day, and that in the following days they did not communicate or do anything together. It is page 029, lines 12 to 20, 22nd April 2009. It is quite impossible to delegate a coordination assignment to someone and then have no communication with him while the work he had to coordinate was still ongoing. If the quoted evidence is true, there is no evidence to support that Popović either coordinated the activities of various VRS or MOP units in Potocari, or that he delegated this kind of work to Momir Nikolic. There is a contradiction in the testimony of Momir Nikolic when he states that he did not communicate with Drina Corps policemen at all and did not see their commander. It is page 013 to 014. And 22 April 2009, and that of the witness Trišić, who testified that he saw the military policemen from Drina Corps provided security to the Muslims in Potocari together with Bratunec Brigade military policemen, and that Momir Nikolic coordinated their activities. It is transcript 20 October 2008, pages 103 to 104. It is, however, The presence of the Drina Corps military police in Potocari was restricted to the escort of General Krstić. At that time, the military police of the Drina Corps was deployed at Kočari, not engaged in military police tasks, but in the combat operation. 90% of the members of the 5th Military Police Battalion of the Drina Corps Command were engaged in the combat operation in June until 7 July 1995, and further. It is 1D1078, paragraph 5. Only 13 military policemen stayed in Vlasenica to perform military police duties and carried out in rotation the physical security of the Drina Corps Command, escort of the commander and the chief of staff, etc. It's VUGA report, VUGA transcript, 2nd July 2008, page 204 to 206. However, it was quite possible that Trišić saw soldiers who had military police insignias of the Drina Corps on their uniforms. The evidence indicates that these insignias were sewed onto the uniforms so that members of the unit who were redeployed to other units took with their uniforms their insignia. The witness Bjelanović testified that it facilitated their movement because it was much easier for them to find transportation from one place to another with such insignia. It is 10 June 2008, page 274 to 275. The problem grew to the extent that Popović personally went to the Vezionica factory to discuss the problem with the commercial director of the factory, Slaviša Vlačić. They were trying to find a solution for the problem with armbands instead of sewing the insignia onto the uniforms. I refer to 1D 1438. It is witness statement of Slaviša Vlačić. So, Momir Nikolić knew the military policemen from the Drina Corps who were present in Potocari and did not communicate with them because they were escort of General Krstić and he had nothing to do with them. However, he communicated with the soldiers who were not members of the Drina Corps military police at the time, but just wore these insignias, and because of that he testified that he did not communicate with military policemen of the Drina Corps. On the other hand, Trišić saw Momir Nikolić communicate with the soldiers who wore the insignias of the Drina Corps military police, but did not know that they were not at the time members of that unit. As a result of the above, the defense admits that Momir Nikolić either communicated with the escort of General Krstić or with soldiers who only wore the insignia of the Drina Corps military police, but were not the members of that unit. If the military police of the Drina Corps was present, except the escort of General Krstić under his direct command, they would have their superior who would be in charge of the unit or the part of unit deployed in Potocari. Finally, there was no way that Nikolić could issue the orders to Drina Corps military police or to the units of the main staff. He could not also get such an authority from Popović. The defense therefore submits that there is no evidence that Popović had authority from his commander to coordinate the work of units in Potocari on 12 and 13 July 1995, or that he transferred such an authority to Momir Nikolić and oversaw his work there. Popović was not involved in coordination and security of the bases. The prosecution submits that Popović, as the sole security officer of the Drina Corps Command at the time, was involved in logistical issues concerning the bases. There is no evidence, however, that Popović was involved in the logistic issues concerning the bases. The bases were provided by the commander of the Drina Corps, at Ministry of Defense with the participation of the competent services of the VRS. There was no need for Popović to leave his jobs and become involved in that of others. On the other hand, Popovic's first duty was to perform counterintelligence work because he was only the officer in the Drina Corps who was authorized to do that. The essence of Operation Action Judas was to detect the conspiracy against General Mladić and other leading officers of the VRS. In short, Popović was competent for dealing with secret activities against VRS and inside VRS. His participation in the security of the buses transporting Muslim population from Potocari to B and H held territory was not ordered to do that, and it is not within his counterintelligence work. The column of buses needed physical security only, and this was a task which the corps commander and the commanders of the units in the area had to provide. In addition, the witness Kosoric testified that he was tasked by General Krstić to go before the first convoy of buses to Luke and convey the order of General Krstić to the unit in that area to secure the unhindered passage of refugees to Kladanj. It is page 794 to 795, 30 June 2009. This had nothing to do with security in competence of the security officer, but with physical security of opening the passage through minefields. May we move to the private session, Your Honor, please?
Sure. Let's go into private session for a short while, please. We are back in open session.
All these matters are in the purview of the Corps Commander and commanders of units deployed in the area, since such activities required physical security, and there is no evidence that any participation in this task was requested from Popović by his commander. Finally, the deployment of patrols was within the competence of the Corps Commander and the commanders of subordinate units from the area along the route. As such, this submission remains substantiated. Popović was only in Potocari on 12 July afternoon for a short period, and this was when General Mladić, General Krstić, and other officers was present there. However, he had no additional task to oversee either the transport of Muslim population or the so-called separation of the Muslim men. The prosecution submission that General Živanović was in Potocari at the time is in clear contradiction with the Srebrenica video, where he was not captured at all on this date. The submission of the prosecution that Popović saw the distribution of the bread in Potocari is also unfounded. The video the prosecution refers to shows the distribution of bread to Muslim refugees who were inside the UN compound in Potocari by VRS soldiers and UN members. Popović was standing between the truck where the bread was and the refugees who were behind the fence. His back was toward refugees, clearly indicating that he was not overseeing the bread distribution. At one point, Popović asked the soldiers to stop the distribution of the bread, and it seems that they complied and removed the truck to another place and resumed the same job. The video only indicates that Popović thought that they stop of bread distribution from that point, from that position, and the removal of the truck, and not that he oversaw the distribution of the bread. If Popović was in charge of overseeing the distribution of the bread, he would have watched the participants of the process, the soldiers who carried out the task, and refugees who got the bread. His acts just depict that at one moment the truck presented an obstacle to his task, As such, he sought its removal. Popović did not instruct VRS soldiers in Potocari on 13 July. It is particularly unsubstantiated that Popović was aware of intimidation, physical violence, and abuse of the Muslim population in Potocari. None of the witnesses testified that he saw Popović at such places or that he complained to Popović about it. It is not true that Popović was next to the White House. The identification by Rutten was wrong, and its unreliability was obvious from the fact that he was the only one who recognized General Živanović as the officer who on 12 and 13 July was in Potocari giving instruction and in charge. On 12 July 1995, nobody but Rutten saw General Živanović in Potocari. We have seen him in Vlasenica on that day, it's St. Peter's Day, giving the speech. He alleged that he also saw him on 13 July 1995 near the White House. I refer to transcript 824, 13 November 2006. He managed to recognize him from a photograph where the face of General Živanović was not captured at all, but only the back of his head. It is P2324. Nobody else had seen General Živanović in Potocari either on 12 or 13 July. As such, the recognition of Popović and Živanović given by Rutten is not credible and was carried out contrary to the rules explained in this proceeding by Professor Wagner. He explained the difference between identification and recognition, plus the importance of the perception of the witness of a person at the site. Professor Wagner testified that the identification of the person with his back towards camera might be misleading. I refer to transcript 8 September 2008, pages 367 to 369. Professor Wagner finally explained the phenomena of how the memory of a witness gets worse over time, but despite this, he produces new facts about an event he could not remember earlier. The professor explained that despite of the fact that the recollection of the memory goes down, the confidence of the witness goes up. It's transcript page 370 to 371. The defense submits that this phenomenon actually occurred with the witness Rutten as regards the identification of Popović and Živanović from the aforementioned photograph. It is very interesting that the witness Rutten did not protest or complain to Popović about alleged abuses he noticed in White House, although he allegedly noticed him during his second visit there and was aware that he was not an ordinary soldier. It is transcript 29 November 2006, page 805 to 806. He also did not complain to the other individual from the same photograph who, according to him, was in charge of the whole process in Potocari, and who allegedly on the 13th July afternoon was around the White House too. It is transcript 7 December 2006, page 225 to 227. In addition, the witness failed to mention this event or the persons he identified in his October 1995 witness statement. It's transcript 4 December 2006, page 1995. He did not also mention either in Krstić or during the proofing session in this case that the person he recognized gave instructions to the soldiers despite the fact that this recollection had not improved in last 10 years. It's transcript page 220 to 221. As the intelligence officer for the Dutch BAT, he must have been aware that 28th Brigade, consisting of more than 1,000 soldiers, had its command in Potočari. However, he concealed this fact by saying that, I quote, "There are no real B&H soldiers around. That is shelling where there are no real B&H soldiers around, and there weren't any at the time. And there were no B&H positions near the Potočari area." End quotation. He corroborated his testimony by stating that there were only civilians wearing normal civilian clothes, although he must have been aware that ABH troops in the enclave also performed their tasks in civilian clothes, and that 300 ABH members were inside UN compound in Potočari. I refer to page 830 to 831, transcript, it is transcript 30 November 2006. The defense denies that Popović was aware of the extent of the abuse of the Muslim population by Serb soldiers, or that he encouraged them in acts of intimidation and physical violence, as the prosecution states in paragraph 2408. The prosecution did not prove that the scale of abuse and killing in Potočari was such that Popović had to be aware of them. There were at least 20,000 people in Potočari at the time. The evidence states that 9 bodies were found near Budak in the woods, far from the main road. It is P2179, sorry. And one Muslim man who was taken behind White House on 13 July and executed. This would mean that 10 people were killed. That number, as well the place where their bodies were allegedly found, do not indicate that the extent of the abuse and killing in Potočari was such that Popović had to be aware of them. There is no evidence that Popović was in position to observe serious abuses and crimes committed by VRS members. There is no evidence that he was present to any physical maltreatment, theft of goods, or similar events. In addition, there is no evidence that he was reported about such incidents. He was therefore not in position, as the prosecution states, to take uncompromising action and prevent the crimes. There is no rule prohibiting an army from detaining suspected members of the enemy's forces during a war. The crucial point is that security organ had nothing to do with the detention of suspected members of the enemy forces or the establishment of their identity unless it was explicitly ordered or sought by his superior. Popović, in his capacity of the security organ of the Drina Corps, had no duties or responsibilities for the detention or treatment of prisoners of war in Potočari. The security organs in general were authorized to interview prisoners of war if they could provide relevant information related to the enemy's secret activities against VRS or actions from within the army itself. I refer to expert report of Vuga, paragraph 434, and his testimony 30 June 2008, pages 052 to 053. However, it was left on their assessment and other information if they deemed that a particular prisoner could be in possession of such kind of information. Again, VUGA 082 to 084, same transcript. Popović did not interview any prisoner of war because he deemed that they could not provide such information about enemies' intents and plans, their combat activities, or facts pertaining to other crimes was within the competence of the intelligence or commands of the units or military police. For example, Momir Nikolić brought Rešit Sinanović to the witness Zlatan Čelanović in Bratunac Brigade, military police, in order to investigate if he participated in war crimes against the Serb population. I refer to transcript 21st April 2009, page 932 to 933. He also did not assess that Sinanović, who had a significant position in B&H authority, was in possession of information relevant for his counterintelligence or intelligence work. There was no evidence that identification of detainees could be done through sight of their identity documents. These documents are issued by the authorities in the enclave without any central control or confirmation of their authenticity. In addition, many of the Muslims discarded their identification documents, although they were not required to do so. According to the statement of witness Van Dijn, the area around the bus station was full of passports and other papers. I refer to Van Dijn testimony, 28 September 2006, page 352 to 354.
Mr. Zivanovic, I don't mean to interrupt you, but at page 56, if you see at line 6, it makes reference, he also did not assess that Zivanovic, and I know that's not the name that you mentioned, who held a significant position in the B&H authority. I wonder if you could repeat that name so we have it on the record. I think it was Sinanovic.
The name is wrong.
Thank you.
Sinanović. Rešit Sinanović, yes. The selection and screening of the arrested people was performed through the checking of their hands, fingers, smelling of gunpowder, inspection of their clothes. I refer to Rutten, 30 November 2006, page 896, line 21 to 898, line 1. The screening was carried out over a period or more than 1 day at different locations. Again, Rutten, same transcript, 853, line 13 to 855, line 16. Many of them, the last reference is 7 December 2006, page 264, lines 12 to 17. Many of them had ammunition and left in front of White House. The ammunition exploded when the pile was burnt. It was testified by Franken on 17 October 2006, page 578. In addition, many prisoners were interrogated in the White House. Again, Rutten, 30 November 2006, page 857. Because of that, the submission of the prosecution that there was not screening or investigation of arrested people is unsubstantiated. The prosecution states that Popović significantly contributed to and shared the intent with the other GCA members to participate in the GCA to murder Muslim men from Srebrenica. The prosecution submits that Popović was aware that the purpose of the arrest and capture of Bosnian Muslim men in the column was to execute them. For such submission, the prosecution relies upon two communications of General Tolimir. It's paragraph 2416, alleging that General Tolimir directed Drina Corps security organs to propose to brigade commands that all measures to capture the enemy soldiers from Srebrenica should be taken. The prosecution mischaracterizes the communications from General Tolimir sent to the subordinate intelligence and security organs as evidence that Popović, I quote, would have been provided with information concerning prisoners, end of quotation, as well as that he had been directly involved in organizing and implementing any corresponding measures. Two communications convey information by General Tolimir about the movement of 28 Division and Muslim armed group after the fall of Srebrenica and alerted all the subordinate units about the threats against the civilian population and VRS combat units that could emerge along their routes. I refer to P148, penultimate paragraph. He directed intelligence organs to propose measures to be taken by commands to prevent armed Muslims from illegally reaching Tuzla and Kladen, such as setting up ambushes along the routes in order to arrest them. The second communication directed the security organ of the brigades to propose to the commanders of the units deployed along the line of withdrawal of 28 Division to undertake all measures to prevent the withdrawal and to capture the enemy soldiers. It's P149, page 1, last paragraph. The communication warned that special attention should be paid to monitoring the gaps on the VRS forward defense line and possible escape routes along the corridors, as well as to the possible sudden attacks on residential areas, rear combat disposition elements, and defense elements. This means that nothing in the two communications spoke about intent to murder prisoners, but only about need to prevent the 28 Division from reaching B and H held territory and endangering VRS and the civilian population en route. However, these communications, as well as the communications for DP 111, are significant for the other reasons. The communications sent by General Tolimir to Popović were addressed to the IKM of the Drina Corps in Bratunac, meaning that on 12 July, Popović was at the Drina Corps IKM in Bratunac. This corroborates the Bratunac Brigade document booking a room for him for 11 and 12 July. When the Stupčanica 95 order for the attack on Žepa was issued, the IKM of the Drina Corps was moved to Krivače, so the IKM in Bratunac was closed and the further stay of Popović became unnecessary. Secondly, the document 4PD 111 demonstrates that the information and instruction of General Tolimir to MUP was conveyed by General Krstić and not Popović. This clearly indicates that Popović was not authorized to coordinate with MUP, but that all communication with MUP remained in the hand of General Krstić, who commanded the units taking part in the Krivaja 95 operation. Thirdly, the messages of General Tolimir clearly warned of sudden attacks on civilian and military targets that could be carried out by the forces of the 28th Division on their way towards B&H held territory. It meant an increased danger from sabotage and terrorist enemy groups. The detecting and preventing of such activities was in the exclusive competence of Popović, making his presence in the critical areas necessary as soon as the route of withdrawal of the enemy forces was established. The prosecution has not proven that Popović knew for abuses, ill treatment, the failures to provide adequate food and water for the prisoners in Konjević Polje, Sandići, and Nova Kasaba. He was not duty-bound or ordered by his commander to undertake this responsibility. I refer to paragraphs 2429 to 2431 of prosecution final brief. The prosecution submits that Popović was present at a meeting in Bratunec Brigade on 13 July at 9:30, and that he was informed about prisoners Momir Nikolić and Sergeant Janković saw in around Konjević Polje. At 9:30 on 13 July, Popović was not present at any meeting in the Bratunec Brigade headquarters. The prosecution relies on Momir Nikolić's statement of fact and Vasić dispatch concerning the meeting held with the Mladić on the morning of 13 July, during which the role of MUP in the ongoing evacuation of the civilian population to Kladanj was discussed. Momir Nikolić was not also present at the meeting and had no knowledge that Popović was there. The communication by Vasić did not also mention that Popović was present. However, it demonstrated that Popović had no task in coordination of the MUP. Otherwise, Vasić would have received his task from Popović, not Mladić, as he stated. The assertion of the prosecution, it is paragraphs 2423 to 2428, that on 13 July 1995, I quote, Popović must have been involved in assigning Sergeant Janković to drive UNAPC to Konjević Polje, having been present at the time and as Momir Nikolić's professional superior. End of quotation. Is pure speculation, not confirmed either by Nikolić or anyone else. Also, there is no evidence that Popović was apprised of Janković's and Nikolić's observations and activities in and around Konjević Polje. In paragraphs 2432 to 2434, the prosecution states that Popović actively implemented the command decision to kill the Bosnian Muslim men and boys of Srebrenica, since the prisoners presented a security threat. However, there is no evidence that the counterintelligence measures were required to deal with such threat. In fact, for the neutralization of such threats, only adequate forces were needed to guard them, meaning that only physical security was necessary, for which the security organs have no capacity to implement. Again, I refer to VUGA, 30 June 2008, page 082 to 084. There is no evidence that Popović was assigned to undertake the above task. As already told, on 11 July, the president of Republika Srpska, Dr. Radovan Karadžić, assigned Miroslav Deronić to ensure, I quote, that all civilian and military organs treat all citizens who participated in combat against the VRS as prisoners of war, and ensure that the civilian population can freely choose where they will live or move to. End quotation. Deronić was authorized to appoint his assistant for this purpose. The decision came into force on the same day. This means that from 11 July 1995, Deronic and his assistants were exclusively in charge of prisoners of war and all the Muslim civilians from Srebrenica. He was only one authorized by the Supreme Commander to ensure that all civilian and military organs treat prisoners adequately. Sorry. The term ensure meant that all the other organs listed in the document should act upon the Commissioner's requests because the President had entrusted him with the authority to implement his decision about prisoners of war. I refer to VUGA, 2nd July 2008, page 218. As already said, Popović was not present in Bratunac on the night of 13 and 14 July, and he was not registered at Hotel Fontana on these dates. There is no evidence that Popović was with Biara on 13 July in Bratunac or communicated with him at the time about prisoners-related issues. General Krstić did not leave Popović in Bratunac because Popović was in Vlasenica on 13 July, working on the counterintelligence security of General Mladić, who came to Vlasenica that afternoon to be present for the handover of duties between General Živanović and General Krstić and prepare the counterintelligence security for the newly established Drina Corps IKM for the JEPA operation. I refer to VUGA, 3rd July 2008, transcript page 234 to 235, and Bjelanović, transcript 10 June 267 to 269. As already said, Popović was not present in Bratunac. Popović did not contact Drago Nikolić on the 13 July 1995 at about 19 or 20 hours at the IKM of the Zvornik Brigade, as described in paragraph 2435. He did not tell Nikolić anything about prisoners, their coming to Zvornik, organization of their transfer, and that someone would be sent to provide Nikolić with further information. It is unsubstantiated that Popović, by virtue of his position, knew about the detention, abusing, and murder of the prisoners. Whoever gave such an order was not bound to inform Popović of it, being without troops under his command or any other necessary resources for the purpose, and given his position as the only security officer in the Drina Corps command competent to carry out counterintelligence work, such information would be unnecessary and pointless. Also, whoever executed such order had no duty to report to Popović, but to the superior who issued the order. He had no responsibility for prisoners in Bratunac because such responsibility since 11 July 1995 was explicitly assigned to the civilian Commissioner Deronic and his authorized assistants. There is no sufficient and credible evidence to show that Popović was in Zvornik on 14 July 1995 at approximately 800 hours and had a meeting with Beara and Nikolić. The prosecution sees the meeting as a follow-up of the ostensible Popović conversation with Nikolić, which never took place. The defense addressed the testimony of Birčaković in paragraph 494 and 495 of its final brief and sticks to these arguments. The uncertainty of Birčaković's testimony is demonstrated in his report. The uncertainty of Birčaković's testimony is demonstrated in his response that, I quote, people from the Drina Corps attending the meetings with Drago, end of quotation. It is transcript page 044, lines 22 to 23, 7 May 2007. meaning that at least 2 or more people from the Drina Corps met Nikolic and that there was more than one meeting between him and unknown persons from the Drina Corps. The witness testified that it was him who waited for the buses on 14 July 1995 at Vidikovac Motel and led them to Orahovac School. He did not indicate Popović or a Golf leading such convoy, as stated in paragraph 489 of defense final brief. In addition, the witness said to Dean Manning in 2002 that his recollection of Popović was foggy, meaning that his recollection of Popović's presence was not credible enough. It's transcript 8 May 2007, pages 094 to 095.
Moment, while we are still on the page 63, line 2.
Sorry.
That the Ronic and Nikolic is obviously a mistake. You, if I remember, I heard you say Beara and Nikolic. Is that correct?
Beara and Nikolic, not the Ronic.
Okay. So that needs to be corrected. Thank you.
Okay. Finally, he did not say in his interview to the OTP that such meeting ever took place on the 14 July 1995. Again, same transcript, page 097, lines 12 to 17. May we move again to the private session, Your Honor?
Sure. Let's go into private session for a short while, please.
Defense have been reinforced, meanwhile, with the prosecution submission that at the same time, when Popović allegedly led convoy of buses from Bratunac to Orahovac, it is paragraph 2464 of the prosecution final brief, Popović was in Dragaševac, in the base of the 10th Sabotage Detachment. In fact, the prosecution asserts that Popović was in Dragaševac on 14 July 1995 between 10 and 1200 hours. It is paragraph 2469. The prosecution also alleged that a person whose contemporaneous description and rank clearly matched of Popović was seen by the PW 101 at the execution site at Orahovac. The person had sidearms, and to strengthen its argument, the prosecution referred to the Srebrenica trial video depicting that Popović on 12 July had sidearms too. The prosecution also found that the presence of Popović, I quote, at least at the one other execution site at Bishina, end quotation. The defense clearly indicated in its final brief that the testimony of the witness PW 101 was untrue as regard his presence at the execution site in Orahovac and saving the life of the PW 105, hiding him in his van from the other soldiers who allegedly would kill him. It is in paragraph 224 and 496 to 512. In short, the witness had a good reason to be untruthful. Obligatory element of the equipment for all officers of VRS. Many of them could be seen at various videos and photos bearing sidearms. Significantly, the prosecution did not put a question to the witness in order to get more details concerning the identity of the alleged lieutenant colonel. It is the submission of the defense that it was not done because such efforts would be negative for the prosecution case. Because of that, the prosecution opted to leave it unclear and to astray to the conclusion that this person was Popović. As to rank, the witness did not say that a man was lieutenant colonel, but lieutenant colonel or the colonel at most. He described that person as the tall man, but Popović is not tall. He described that person as good-looking man, but Popović was not good-looking. His testimony
And if Popović is not tall, how would you classify me?
I'll be restrained.
Or yourself?
drove the wounded boy to the Zvornik hospital upon the order of certain Milosevic. It is transcript 15 July 2009, page 984, lines 16 to 24. According to the hospital record, it was in midnight between 14 and 15 July 1995. PW-101 did not go to Orakovets to transport the food and drinks for the soldiers, but to take assistant commander for logistics of the Zvornik Brigade, Sreten Milosevic, to Orakovets. Namely, he testified that he called the brigade from a house in Orakovets and sought the duty officer to send a car to fetch him back to Zvornik. It's again same transcript, page 982 to 983.
One moment, Mr. Zivanovic. Mr. McCloskey, I suggest you have a look at from line 22 of page 66 to where we are now, and see whether there is any inherent risk of revealing the PW-101's identity. Just come back to me when you can. Thank you. Let's proceed.
Thank you. The witness lied at least on 6 points. First, that he was sent to Orakovets by Pantic. Second, that purpose of his travel was to transport the food and drink to the Zvornik Brigade soldiers who were there. I referred to transcript 22nd February 2007, lines 564, lines 5 to 15. That he was sent by Sreten Milosevic to bring the food to the soldiers at the execution site. It's transcript page 569 to 571. That he was at the execution site at the main asphalt road to Križevice and Kitovnice or Orač, and so the execution there, including the known and unknown persons he allegedly saw there, including the lieutenant colonel or colonel who commanded to the execution squad and insisted on the killing of the wounded boy. It is the same transcript, pages 580 to 590. That he saved the life of the boy, but from the person and all other soldiers of the brigade by transporting him directly to Zvornik Hospital. It is also page 584. That there were no other members of the Zvornik brigade in his van, and that it happened in the dusk. The witness testified that at the point that he arrived at the execution site, he was told by a soldier that in another meadow there were executions carried out, and that the other meadow was full of corpses, and they could stop firing upon people there, and that they moved to that other meadow where you were located at the time. It is page 720, lines 15 to 21. Such statement is in clear contravention with the testimony of survived victims as analyzed in the defense final brief in paragraphs 403 to 408. However, the prosecution 503 to 508. Sorry. However, the prosecution submits that on 14 July, between 8:30 and 9:30 p.m., the witness Srećko Acimović allegedly spoke with Popović, who was in the Zvornik brigade. The witness was allegedly said by the Zvornik brigade duty officer that Vujadin Popović had arrived. Sorry. Sorry, may we have a break then?
Yes,
Thank
I
you.
was going to suggest it. We'll have a 25-minute break. Thank you.
All right.
Naći će se.